In this lesson, we're going to be building a particle trail of sparks. Okay, so for this set of particles that we're going to be using, I want to use CC Particle World because it has the capability of having a floor. Now, a floor just means that we'll have the option to bounce these particles off the floor and reflect them. So it gives us a little bit more capability than the last particle system that we used. So come over here to Effects and Presets and type in Particle. And let's go ahead and just jump over into the Mantra Logo Layers Large comp that we've just kind of dropped onto our main comp there. And let's give us a solid that we can use this particle system with. So go up to Layer, New, Solid. And I'm just going to kind of choose a golden color for this. It's not really going to make a big difference on the color of the particles. The particle world will decide that, but still it's going to just help me figure out what I need here for when I'm just trying to stay organized. So let's move forward. I think I want this particle system to start right around here, just after this logo has finished animating and revealing on. It's probably around frame 55. That's just about after that's finished. So I'm actually going to pull the particle system forward, and I actually am going to pull the logo type forward too, because I don't want that to come on until much later, probably right around here in the 80s for those frames. So now we kind of have this staggered a little bit better. And I also know that I want the particle system to follow a null object's path, just like we did for our other particle systems. So let's go ahead and go up here to Layer, New, and create a null object. And let's just get that started animating. So I'm going to pull that forward, and we'll bring up the position here. And let's just start this position just right here on the edge of this red piece. And I just kind of want this to sweep all along the bottom. So we'll go ahead and hit the position here. And then I want this to last over about 100 frames. So that means if we're starting this on frame 55, we need to be on frame 155. Let's turn off the particle world just so we can see a little bit better for a moment. And then this is going to go all the way up here to the top. But we definitely need some curves in this path to get it to go all the way around here, but I think we may even need a few more keyframes. So I'm just going to come down here about 3/4 of the way to that last key, and we'll pull this down here. And let's do another one over here. And you might be able to get away with fewer than 4, but I think it's just going to be easier for me to have 4 here. So just like that. And then let's go ahead and start editing those handles so that they follow that curve a little bit better. Just pulling those along that edge. This one could probably be a little bit closer to the edge, just like that. And this one, again, closer to the edge. And you want to be careful that you don't overlap too much in one direction or the other. I really want to try to get it as close to the edge as possible here. Except on this side over here, we have this little kind of divot, and I'm just going to, instead of trying to mimic that perfectly, I'm just going to leave that as kind of an open area because I think it'll be better to have the curve just following a nice path instead of kind of dodging back over to that left side. Okay, so this looks pretty good. We have that following a path really nicely with that curve. Now what I want to do is change the speed of this. So you can see that the dots are not distributed very evenly. So let's just go ahead and get our interpolation figured out. So this last keyframe here, I want it to ease into. So I'll hit F9 to add some easy ease. And then let's go into our graph editor and give it even some more influence. Just take that up a little bit. So that's at about 60% influence now. So that's going to even be slowing into that last frame. And then I'm going to select those two keys and we'll rove them. So right click and choose rove across time. So now everything's going to pretty much go at the same speed until we start getting into the influence of this final key where it's really going to slow down. So now that we have that all set up, I'm ready to go ahead and start trying to parent my producer position to my null position. So let's go ahead and take a look at the producer for CC particle world. As you can see, it's a little bit different than CC particle systems too. So we've got position X, position Y, and position Z now, instead of one position value that controls both the X and the Y. And this can be a little bit confusing. So we're going to need to do a little bit more extensive parenting, and we're also going to need to use an expression to get this to work. Because if you'll notice, the values here are a little bit different than maybe something you might be used to. So let's talk about why and how to go about fixing this. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll toggle down that yellow solid. I'll turn that back on so you can kind of see what's going on here. And open up the producer. And what I want to do is parent the position X of my producer to the position X of my null. So instead of just dragging it up to position, I'm going to drag it to the actual X value, which is what you see right here. And then Y is going to be that second value there. So go ahead and we'll alt click that position stopwatch for the producer, grab your expression pick whip, drag it up here, and make sure you get right on that value. You'll know when it has a little box around it. And you can see that now we've gotten that slight expression there. And the particles are disappeared basically. So if I zoom way, way out here, I don't even think I can zoom out far enough to show you this. The particle system you can see now is very, very long. So what it's doing is it's looking at that position in terms of pixels, because the position of our null is measured in pixels. So you'll notice whenever you create a solid or a null, it never starts at 0. It always, for those values of its position, it's always going to start at, something like 640 by 360 or something like that. And so you may have wondered why it's like that. And that's because After Effects measures most things in pixels from the upper left-hand corner. So this upper left-hand corner has a coordinates of 0, 0. So if something's down here, it's going to be about half the width of your comp. So if your comp is 1280, half of 1280 is going to be 640. So that's why you always get 640 for that X value where it's starting, because it's always going to start from the middle. CC Particle World has a totally different way of measuring where the middle of something is. CC Particle World has been looking at this in terms of our comp size equaling 1. So that's why these numbers are so low that you see over here. And then this 743 just totally throws it off, because basically what it thinks we have done now is told it that we want our position of our producer to be 743 times to the right of the middle of our comp. So that might be a little bit confusing, but just imagine that it says that if we had only turned that up to a 1, it would have put the producer right here. So really, really kind of confusing how that works, but it can be fixed using expressions. So we've already kind of used an expression here by parenting that X value of our null to, or excuse me, the X value of our CC particle world to the X value of our null. So now we need to go into that position of the producer and add an expression that's going to help fix that. So go ahead and click here on that expression, and you kind of see what it's already created for you. So we've got some easy things. We've got the this comp dot layer, and then we've got the null that we've parented it to, and then it says dot transform dot position, and then it gives us the 0. So basically what this translates to is in this composition, the null layer 2 is going to be used to transform the position of this X value. And the reason why it's represented by a 0 is because this X value is the first number in a sequence of numbers. So the X value would be represented by 0, the Y value would be represented by a 1, and if we were doing Z, it would be represented by a 2. So don't ask me why it's like that. It's computer stuff, and you just have to accept that. So we've got this 0 here that is basically saying this is our X value. So this is already written for us. Most of it's already written, but we need to now tell it that we want it to come back. It's way, way out there, 743 times the size of our comp out there. So we need to divide this by our comp size, which is 1280. And that's going to kind of convert that weird space that CC Particle World is using back to our pixels that we're used to. So I'm going to put the division symbol here, which is basically going to be /, and then we're going to type in 1280. And we actually, because we're going to add another value here, we're going to put this whole expression in parentheses. So add a close parentheses, then we'll go back to the beginning and put that open parentheses here. So now I'm just going to click off and show you that we're halfway there now. So that part of the expression brought this back, and it's over here on the side, but we still need to bring it over a little bit more. So basically what we've done is told it, instead of starting here and thinking of this as your 0, I want you to start over here. So now we need to bring it back just halfway, just one more, so that it's going to look at the middle of this. So all we have to do is go back into that expression and tell it to subtract 0.5, or you could just put in -0.5 and not have the 0. Same difference really. And so now when we click off, that is now going to follow along with that null object. So I'm kind of clicking fast, so it's not having as much time to update, but you can see that that X value is working, but it still looks a little bit high because the Y value hasn't been parented yet. Now the Y value is going to be a little bit more tricky, but not terrible. So let's go ahead and do that one now. I'm going to come down here to the position of the Y. We'll alt click that stopwatch, grab your expression pick whip, and we're going to pull this up here and make sure that you're hovering over the Y value of the null, which is going to be that second number. So let go. And then it's going to kind of put you in that same position. And remember, I told you it's going to have a 1 here. That's because this 0 says that it's X. This 1 says that it's Y. So let's go into that. And this time, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to divide it by 1280. So this time, it went way up. Instead of way to the right, it went way up, 1280 times the size of our comp. So let's go ahead and we'll divide this by 1280, just like we did last time. And we're going to go ahead and put this in parentheses. Just come over here to the side, open parentheses, and then you can click off, and you see that now we're so close. Or actually, I guess it went way to the bottom, not way to the top that time. So we're so close now, we just need a little bit more information here for what to put on the end, just like we did up here. But a -0.5 isn't going to work because we're not working in a square composition. If we were working in a square comp, not a rectangular one, it would be perfectly fine. So the way we get the number that we have here is we actually need to divide our aspect ratio, or we could just divide basically the height of our comp by the width of our comp. So I'm going to bring up my calculator here for you. And the height of our comp is 720. And then I'm going to divide that by 1280. And that equals, let's see, let me start that over for you. This is the hardest part, is punching in the right number. So divide 720 by 1280 equals, and we get this 0.5625. Now, that number basically is kind of what we've solved here for what you get when you want that, basically that offset between what keeps this from being a square, if that makes sense. So now what we need to do is multiply this by that 0.5 to get it back into position. So go ahead and we'll multiply by 0.5, and that equals 0.28125. And that is the value that we need to subtract from this expression here. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to grab that calculator and pull it off to the side so I can still read that number. And then we'll hit negative to subtract here, and then we'll do 0.28125. Click off of that. And now our particle world is following along nicely with are null. So that's a little confusing. I'm not sure why CC particle world is measured in such a strange way, because it really does make it kind of difficult whenever you're dragging the values around. You drag it up to 1 and suddenly the particles aren't even on your comp anymore. And it doesn't matter how big your comp is, it's always going to measure that 1 as the size of your comp. So now that we have those particles traveling along the bottom of our logo, I want to go in our next lesson and start to tweak the look of those particles, because right now they look like fireworks and that's a little bit crazy. I want them to look more like sparks and a little bit more like a stream, but it is definitely coming together. So if you got through this part and you really tried to understand kind of what was going on there with the size of the compositions and those expressions and everything, you did a great job. So we're going to come back in our next lesson and start to just kind of explore the look of those particles and really bring this to life by making those particles feel a lot more integrated. So stick around and we'll learn how to do that in our next lesson.